I got into a disagreement. I forgot something I had been told very early on, never insult a Cuban's mother. And I used the expression, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And guy started throwing things at me. Ultimately, it led to a riot. So now I'm a ringleader. Little gentle me.
You went to
used
a
to be
riot.
on a lifeguard bench.
Yeah.
And eventually they separated the Americans from the Cubans and put us in a dungeon.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. So imagine this. You and your friends wake up one morning, you decide to go fishing. You jump on a boat, you head out. It's something you've done many times before. Everything seems fine. Everything is fine any other day. Except then out of nowhere, you notice a gunship from another country bearing down on your position. They intercept you, they board you, they haul you all off to a foreign prison, throw away the key, and you have no idea why. Sounds horrifying, right? Well, that, believe it or not, is just the beginning of what is an unbelievable real-life story from today's guest, Gordon Hesse, the author of a book. We have the book right here?
We have the book right here.
There's the book. Author of the book, Cuban Blues, How Captivity in a Foreign Prison Saved My Life. So there's stories within stories within stories here, and I can't wait to hear them all. From Gordon. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, Gordon. So great having you here today. So
Thank you.
let's go back to 1973. You were on a fishing boat, a shrimping boat?
I was asked to fill in as a crew member for a good friend of mine who was the skipper of the boat.
Nice.
And he said he had two crew members and he didn't think they were that good and he wanted to have a backup. So I said, yeah, I'll go along. It would be a 2-week journey on the vessel. It was a converted shrimp boat. And then I'd be able to get home and be with my parents in Lavallette, New Jersey, to help them open up their summer cottages.
Got it.
Well, that ended up being 9 months in
Right.
Cuba.
9 months.
So you were on your way to Jamaica on the shrimp boat?
That's correct.
And had you been doing that for a while? Was that something
No. The skipper of the boat, his name was Chip. He had gone there before, and he had come back with marijuana.
Uh-oh.
So he had a successful run there. And at the last moment, he said, I don't trust the crew I have here. Would you come along? And he was a dear friend of mine, and I was honored, and it sounded like an adventure. I wasn't going to be involved in any of the marijuana part of it. I was just there to be crew, and I thought, this will be a great thing for me to propel my writing career with an article to Rolling Stone or something like that about how these missions went on illicitly.
I see. And then in the beginning of the book, you talk about you're taking a shower on the boat, and you look out the window and you see what?
I saw a power boat coming up at a very high speed. It was probably maybe half a mile away when I first saw it, and I could see the waves from the bow coming off so quickly. It was clear that they were hell-bent on election.
Yeah.
And that's when I told the skipper, and then I looked at where we were, and we could see the cottages in Cuba.
Wow.
We had gotten that far. Apparently the fellow that was on the wheel watch, who was one of the guys that he was wary about, had apparently fallen asleep at the wheel.
Oh, no.
And that's how we ended up in the Cuban waters. They boarded us. They found we had weapons, which included a rifle and a pistol.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Exactly the tools you need to invade Cuba.
you were there. The boat was coming rapidly at you. You turned around. You told everybody. At that point, you probably couldn't turn the boat around, right?
No, there wasn't enough time to move
And
it.
it's a slower boat, right? They were going really fast.
Yeah, this was a chugger, and the boat coming up on us was high speed. I mean, we could see the wake coming out of it, and it was flying.
And you knew that this was probably military? Like what?
I just knew it was something bad, something I didn't want.
So what did you tell the captain, or like were you?
They ended up pulling up to us and told us to, kill our engines, and then they examined our boat and they found the guns and the rifles, and they said you're going to have to go into Nuevitas in Cuba and have your boat fumigated and checked out. To me, bad things were happening, but they were still phenomenal.
Right. Were you scared?
Yeah, well, I didn't feel like I was on a good path.
Yeah. So wait, let me take a step back.
Yeah.
You knew this was a drug run?
I
right?
did.
You did. You know it, but you considered yourself like an embedded journalist
Yeah.
in
Right.
this
He wasn't a part of it.
experience, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I saw it.
That's not how the Cuban
No,
government...
no. They
So-
weren't really interested in any background. It was just we were in their waters and we
Right.
looked threatening in some way, and
Right.
there was probably an opportunity for them to benefit in some way. And ultimately, they kept the boat.
And did you try to deny, or did the captain try to deny what was happening? Like, why do you have a gun? Why do you have guns? Why do you have knives? Why do you have
Money.
$20,000?
Right.
Yeah.
Were there any drugs on board?
No.
So it was before any deal was made.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. But what excuse, what explanation were you guys able to give?
Just that we were on our way down to Jamaica. That's it. And literally, I knew no more than that.
Got it.
I
Yeah.
was there for the ride and to examine it and get a good story.
You had plausible deniability. You
Yes.
had no idea why the guns were there. You had no idea why the money was there.
Right.
Yeah.
I did not know about the money at all.
Interesting.
What was that? Do you know? What was the money?
It was money to
buy it.
go to
To buy
pay the people that were going to bring the marijuana on the boat.
Makes sense.
Got it.
I mean, I was very removed from the details. It was like Chip said, I need somebody I can trust because
Right.
these two guys, they don't have a lot of experience on the waters. I had worked on clam boats in New Jersey.
Yeah.
I knew how you handled a boat.
Yeah.
Not
yeah.
that I was an expert by any means, but it was something I was familiar with. And he started getting very, very nervous that he was working with people he didn't know what their capabilities were.
And I think we should kind of explain to our audience who might not know exactly what the climate was like in 1973. But of course, like marijuana was illegal back then. Fidel Castro was in
power.
office.
Yeah,
Yep.
Fidel was in power,
So it was a very different climate than it is today.
very much so.
Do you want to explain that a little bit? What it
Well,
was like?
I don't know whether I'm somebody to describe the politics of the time,
Right.
but they were very wary of us, and we were wary of them. I was just a little guy on a boat
Just a guy on
trying
a
to
boat.
get an interesting story, and
But safe to
I got
say-
more than I bargained for.
It wasn't like the kind of thing where you would just go hang out in Cuba.
No, we weren't going there with our party hats or anything like that. No.
Had no intention of being anywhere near Cuba.
No, I
was
had no plans on touching soil in Cuba. I was going to go around. We were going to get a loading, come back on it, and I'd get off, and then I'd head back to New Jersey to be with my family again.
Right.
So the reality is, if I pull you over, let's say I'm a Cuban vessel, and you're in my waters, and I board you, search, and I find knives, guns, money, I'm probably arresting you,
Yeah,
right? So
that's pretty much the way
Yeah.
they
and I'm
saw
probably
it.
interrogating you, and I don't know what that looks like in the 70s in Cuba. What does that look like if they're interrogating you?
We weren't really holding anything,
Right.
but we had an intention.
Yeah.
So the problem as time went on was, how do you prosecute people for something they were intending, but they didn't do?
So they had no case.
Yeah.
Well, so go back to like when they put you. How did it happen that they put you in prison? So the boat then went to shore.
We went to shore. They put us in a mansion, and they gave us very hard chairs to sit on for 3 days and question each of us. And during that time, said they examined all the things that were on the boat, and we were very suspect. They had radios and sound systems that they had taken off the boat, thinking that they'd find micro dots or something like that on it. They said, what are these? And he said, they're radios, and they were digital players. DVDs were new back then.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
That's how far we're going back in history. And he said, they're just music. And the guy questioning him said, all of them? And he said, yeah, all of them. And he pulled out a disc from behind his back and said, what about this one? It's like, we've got you in our grips now. And from there, they took us and they put us in a place called G2, which was a state security prison. And I was in there in solitary confinement for a month.
Oh.
Wow. How old were you? 20?
My 26th birthday was my first day in solitary confinement.
Wow.
What did it look like in there? Was it like you would imagine a solitary confinement cell would look like?
I have pictures in the book that showing
yeah.
exactly what I can draw it from memory, but it was basically 2 heavy planks hanging on chains diagonally, and then there was a vent window but they were louvered inside of each other so that you couldn't look out. You could just see light trickle in, and that was all I had for a month.
Oh my God! So what were you thinking during that time? What?
Oh, my thoughts went all over the place. Reflection on what I'd done wrong in life and how I was upsetting my parents because they didn't even know I was on a boat. So when they got the word that I was missing at sea, you can imagine they were rather jolted by that. And that's the kind of stuff that I didn't know all that at the time, but it was plenty to feel bad about.
So all of you were reported missing?
We were, and then a naval reconnaissance plane saw our ship in the harbor, and that's when the Cubans started replying to State Department questions.
Got it.
And the United States doesn't have direct diplomatic ties, or they didn't at that time, so they had to go through the Swiss embassy, and the Swiss would handle the negotiations.
So for that month you were in that cell, they would bring you food. Would they talk to you? Did you have a writing utensil?
I was called out 2 times. One time was just to get the date on me. Did I have a military record? Was there something that I might be covering up? I was working as a lifeguard and a bartender. Nothing dramatic really. Then I got speeches on communism and how wonderful it was and things of that nature. And I thought, they're going to put me before the cameras, and I'll have to renounce my citizenship or something like that.
So you were in chairs for days, just sitting in a chair. That was, I guess, your interrogation. They're asking you a ton of questions, thinking maybe you're a spy. And at some point, I guess they get nothing out of you guys because there's not much more than it was a drug run. And then they throw you in the prison?
The sequence was went from solitary confinement, then they said they were going to release us. They put us in a mansion. They didn't know what to do with us. They were really confused. Yeah. They put us in a mansion. It was comfortable. It was on the waterfront. We could walk down to the water. We couldn't leave the premises. And then after a month there, we kept saying, well, when are you going to let us go? And they said, very soon. It takes time. And then the next thing I knew, a prison wagon showed up after we'd been there a month, and then they put us in the big prison, which was El Castillo del Principe, the Prince's Castle. Yeah. And that's now a World Heritage Site.
So now you're transferred to the prison.
Mm-hmm.
What's that like? I mean, you had to be terrified.
Well, I found out after the fact. We came in, it's a big star-shaped prison with a number of points on it, and one of the points we were on had, I found out afterwards, 400 men prisoners in one cell, if you can imagine that.
What?
There was 3 places for people to use for a toilet and showers, and we would be released to have lunch, maybe dinner. I don't even remember that. And that went on for months. And ultimately, I got into a disagreement. I forgot something I had been told very early on, never insult a Cuban's mother. And I used the expression, son of a bitch. Yeah. And guys started throwing things at me. Ultimately, it led to a riot. So now I'm a ringleader, little gentle me.
You went to
used
a
to be
riot.
on a lifeguard bench. And eventually they separated the Americans from the Cubans and put us in a dungeon. And we were there for a while. Then we went before a military tribunal, and they tried to present evidence that they didn't really have any, and we denied all of it. And they were stuck on how to make a verdict. And we went back to our cells and went on a hunger strike. 3rd day of the hunger strike, they let us go.
Do you think the hunger strike had an impact, or do you think it was just timing?
I think it was a combination of elements. We didn't fit any of the profiles that they had already. We weren't holding anything illegal.
Right.
Our intentions could be questioned, but we hadn't committed any of those things. We're on a boat that dropped into their waters by accident, and that was pretty clear. And I think they figured we had been such annoyances between the riot and the hunger strike and different things like that. It was like, let's get these 3 out of here. There were about 20 Americans that had been caught with boats or airplanes in Cuba. I think most of them had sentences of at least 6 years.
Wow.
So they ended up putting us on a plane and flew us out through Mexico, and then we landed in Florida.
Did you have a lawyer? Was anyone defending
We met our
you?
lawyer about 10 minutes before the trial.
Really?
Well, it
Same.
was a presentation of facts. They'd ask us questions, and we denied what they were saying. We denied things, and some of those things that was dishonest. It's the only time in my life that I can recall that I lied.
What did you lie about?
No, we weren't going down to Jamaica.
Oh, okay.
No.
So just your intention.
Yeah.
You lied about your.
Yeah.
What was your story? We were just out on the boat.
They
having a good
didn't
time?
want a lot of detail at that point because they weren't getting what they wanted.
Right.
And they figured it's just going to make matters worse for us to be fumbling with it. At least that's the way I see it.
Whose idea was the hunger strike?
I think all of us agreed together.
How did you know that would work?
Well, we didn't. We didn't. We figured we'd try. We knew the other people had been caught barehanded
Right.
with marijuana.
Right.
And we hadn't been caught with anything. We had a boat, with a rifle and a pistol, And they realized that they couldn't prove anything if we denied what we had told them earlier. So we weren't being honest, but
Right.
they weren't being honest with us either.
I think it's the time when you can lie. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah.
The other part of that is you said in your book, at least the beginning of your book, that you did have marijuana the night before. So you did have it as the boat was approaching, but someone...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
One of
someone
the crew
tossed-
members that we were worried
I mean,
about, he had some on the boat.
How
Yeah.
smart was that you guys got rid of that?
Yeah. Well, when I saw the boat coming up, I said, you better get rid of that stuff that you had last night because it's not going to do us any good with these guys coming. And he threw it over. And when they pulled up, they knew that something had been thrown overboard.
Oh, they
so
did.
So they thought, was it magnetic equipment or radio gear? Or they had no idea.
They thought you were a spy? Is that what you're...
They didn't know what we were.
Yeah.
We were just clumsy seamen, really is what it came down to. And I'd worked on clam boats. I'd worked on, hard boats like that and what they're like. I used to unload the docks in Point Pleasant. So I was more comfortable on a boat. That's why my friend Chip said, at the last moment, will you come in? I need somebody else. And he was a dear friend. He'd done a lot of good things for me when I was in a slump. And it was kind of a payback to him.
When you walked into that prison, I think you said 400 people in a cell? Is that the number?
401 cell.
Right. Obviously, the majority of them are Cuban, obviously. There's a small amount, I think you said 30,
Right.
50, something like that, Americans.
Yep.
Were you received poorly because you were American? Were you at more risk because you were American? What was that dynamic of living in that world?
That evolved, especially after I got in a fight and I didn't make a good showing.
Okay.
The Americans got annoyed
Oh.
because up to that point, the impression the Cubans had is that we all knew karate and things of that
Karate.
nature, and I was kind of I went after a guy and somebody collared me from behind and smashed a jar on my head, and it wasn't a pretty show, and I got my head addressed and they put methylate all over and came back, and the Americans said, you really did a lousy job. Up till now, they thought all the Americans knew jiu-jitsu and we were martial arts experts, and you kind of showed them we aren't. And you got to go back and beat that guy. And my head was pounding from the earlier in the day, and they said, you got to attack that guy. And I said, well, point him out to me and I'll go get him. And we did, and it caused a riot in the prison. Guards came in, then they realized maybe we ought to segregate the Americans.
These troublesome
It's a
Americans.
problem, and then they put us in a dungeon.
What was a dungeon? You mentioned that. They put you in a dungeon.
Well, it's basically, I mean, you got to realize this is a castle, basically, that had a moat around it, that had different wings on it, and it had been used as a military base. It overlooked the Plaza of the Revolution. When Fidel spoke, we could actually hear him on the loudspeakers.
The dungeon. So, like, to me, a dungeon's like where they put like dragons, like on Game of Thrones.
Dragons.
Yeah.
Is that what it looked like?
No, this was a cell with one opening in.
Could it have been very dangerous?
I think it was dangerous.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, at one point, the Cubans took us out to the countryside, and up to that point, the guards had been pretty slack-jawed. They didn't look very impressive. These guys, they were spit-polish guys. They had better guns than the previous guys, and they took us out in the country, and they just said, walk up the hill. And the four of us, that were on the crew. We're walking up the hill, and we're thinking, these guys are going to gun us down. Do we run now or not? And we got up to the crest, and there we saw La Cabana, which is right at the mouth of the harbor of Havana, and that's where we were kept there overnight. They shaved our heads and gave us my first professional shave.
Who did that? Like,
that was in
did
the
someone
prison.
have like a
That was in the
straight
prison.
razor at your neck?
Well, I got a haircut and a shave. It's my first professional shave. The barber takes this stuff, it's white, and he puts it all over my face and feels really, really good after. I said, KSS, what is this? What are you putting on my face? And the guy on the bench starts laughing. And I said, all right, what's the joke? He says, oh, it's hemorrhoid cream.
That's a crazy story.
It really is.
It is.
Really have enjoyed that story.
Could easily have gone the other way. Did all of you have the same experience in that prison, or was some worse or better? Or
no, we really weren't allowed to do work details. We just kind of occupied ourselves. I did it by drawing pictures. Some of them are in my book, of what I observed there, what I remembered, trying to capture as much of it as possible. I think of the Joni Mitchell line, reminders you're not good enough. That's pretty much the experience that I went through. I wasn't good enough, and I had to be better as a human being. So I think the whole experience of being there with all the uncertainty that went with it was very valuable to me. I appreciated the value of my parents so much more. They were in their later years, and if they had died while I was away, I would have had that guilt the rest of my life. I got home, they were here, and we had really good closure in the many years that they had after I came back. And the odd thing was, right after I came back, I worked at the docks for a little bit and then found out there was a position as a probation officer. So I ended up walking into the prisons.
On your book, it says how captivity in a foreign prison saved my life. So is that what you mean when you say that you kind of examined yourself while you were there? Is that what saved you?
There was a lot of time for self-examination, to appreciate how fortunate I'd been in life. I had two loving parents. I had some very wonderful advantages throughout life, and this kind of made me recognize a lot more of what I'd been given. It also taught me a little bit about being a little bit tougher myself, being a little bit more thoughtful of other people. My feeling is you got to take an unfortunate thing and find out where is the value in it.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of value in the people that I met, in knowing what it's like to go on a hunger strike and not knowing what the outcome's going to be. And as it turned out, that was enough to get us out of the country. They realized they did not have anything solid to hold us.
So, I mean, here you are probably facing the worst thing you ever faced, I assume, being in prison in Cuba.
Yeah, I can't think of anything
At least up to that point, right?
to top that, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that moment is when you realized, were you headed in the wrong direction? Is that what you see yourself as in your 20s?
I don't want to say drifting, but I was kind of at a unsettled point in my life. I felt like I was going in 8 different directions at one time, and I really needed to have more of a focus on what I did, and I think that helped me kind of clarify for myself what I ought to be doing. I had so many good things laid at my feet. Right. I really did. I was a very fortunate person.
Do you remember the moment when they said, you're free to go?
We weren't sure to believe them. So we didn't put any confidence until we went back to this building they called the immigration building. It was for seamen that had been disassociated with the ship they were on. Mm-hmm. And we stayed there for a couple of days. We had been there previously when they told us they were going to let us go, and then they changed their mind. So they didn't know what to do with us either. Bureaucratically, it's a mess.
So when you got out, it was a blur. You weren't sure you were actually getting out. Did they put you on a plane? Were they with you? Was your lawyer there? Like, do you remember that?
They put us. This immigration building was for people in transit, and we stayed there. Then we met people from the Swiss embassy who said that this has been cleared, and they got the passports that would get us into Mexico because they didn't have direct flights from Cuba to the United States. So we had to go to Mexico, wait there a couple hours, and then take a flight to Florida. And that's where we ended up.
Did you look at your buddies and were like, we're out? Do you remember anything that you said to each other, or?
Oh, well, there's a lot of things. We all disbanded. I never saw the other guys that were in the crew except for my friend Chip. He was a lifelong friend.
So the plane touched down in Florida, and you were home. Did your parents come to get you?
They did, and they had to get back to New Jersey, so I had 2 or 3 days alone. That's where that picture in the
Yes.
cover of the book, that was 3 days after I got out of prison. I had come off of the hunger strike, so everybody said, boy, what happened?
He's all ripped.
Eventually I came home, started working at the docks, and boom, the opportunity to work with the probation department happened. I ended up running a volunteer program to work with kids that were basically slipping into the criminal system.
What made you write the book? I mean, obviously the story, but like, why did you write the book, and why did you call it Cuban Blues?
Well, I wrote it because there was something. I knew that there was something in that experience that I think other people could appreciate.
What's your number one takeaway? Here you are all these years later. You reflect back on that entire experience, top to bottom. Got on that boat that morning, all the way fast forward to landing in that plane back in Miami.
I learned I wasn't good enough, and I had a long ways to go to be a better person. I came out, and it just seemed like things unfolded right in front of me, almost without effort.
Bottom line is, go get captured and go to Cuba
bad
and
as
become a
it
better
gets.
person.
Yes, that's
That's
it.
what we're saying.
You know,
One-
pick
that's one
your
avenue.
country. You know,
Pick your country.
Pick your country
wisely.
I have
carefully.
a feeling maybe that's
Right.
not really what we should be telling people
That's
to do.
great. No, probably not.
Yeah.
But the message, of course, is
Yes.
no matter how bad it is, there's something in there to be taken from it to propel you into a better space.
I think that's it. I think we all have more resources than we realize. We don't tap them. We tend to give up unless we can't give up. And I was in a position where I couldn't give up. I had to keep going. I got some good advice along the way, and I was with some good people. So I just feel like I'm happy with who I am today
Love it.
because of what I went through.
What's next for Gordon Hesse?
That's part of what I'm trying to figure out. Part
Right.
of it is getting my story out. I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of things that can be learned from it.
Well, we really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on and
sure.
telling us your story. And
Great story.
it's very uplifting to think
Thank
that
you.
you could go through that type of turmoil and come out with this attitude. It's crazy.
Well, I think the big lesson is you have more in your capabilities than you think you do. Sometimes you have to be pressed to do it, and you just have to make good judgments or recognize when you made a bad decision, how do you correct it as best you can. And sometimes you can't. You can't let that stay with you the rest of your life because you'll be missing part of life.
Well put. Well put.
Well put.
All right.
Words to live by.
Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on
you.
the
Thank
show.
you for having me. I
We
really
appreciate
appreciate
it.
it. It's been a wonderful opportunity.
For sure. And thank you guys for watching, and we will be back with another episode soon. Be well.